Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, yes, yes. So I'm Jenny. I'm the, I don't know what, of Fourth Trimester Arizona. No, I'm the CEO of Fourth Trimester. And I'm so happy to invite Damara Vasquez this morning. And Damara is a nurse practitioner with the Goodyear location of Agave Pediatrics. And I'm pulling up her bio right now. Yes. So, and she has experienced the challenges and joys of motherhood herself over the past 2 years. She has a 2.5-year-old son and a baby girl due in July of 2021. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She says, as a provider myself, the questions and complexity of parenthood were very surprising to me, but I found comfort in my child's provider, who was also my friend. Damara says, I want every parent to feel as if they have the tools to feel comfortable with their child's provider as well. So we're so glad that you're here and you're willing to talk to us about this. I know from my standpoint as a mother, what happens to me sometimes is that when I'm in the appointment with the provider, I feel like things are moving so quickly and I sort of forget whatever it was that I was going to ask. And then they leave and I'm like, oh crap, I should have asked that. Why didn't I? Or I'll come home later and my husband will be like, did you ask about this? I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't. So I don't know what exactly happens. It's almost like I freeze in the appointment sometimes. Because I'm like, oh, I'm being good. Yes, I am being a good parent. I promise. Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. And then I'm like, oh, I was supposed to ask all those questions. So anyway, I'm really glad that you're here to talk to us about that. And I suspect I might not be alone in that. So hopefully I'm not the only one who freezes. But yeah, I'm just delighted to have you here to talk with us about that and about what you're looking at when you're, looking at a child and how to build that relationship. So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I'm just so excited to hear that there's a West Valley chapter of the Fourth Trimester. So I'm definitely, once I became a mom 2 years ago, I was just like, oh my gosh, this whole new world opened up to me. And I was like, this is amazing, So it's just really great to be able to be a part of this. And as I talked to you before, I just hope to be a part of more meetings, just joining in the community and just talking because it is nice. So I do have a story about my son in the car, so I can add to all the stories. So I just have one. So right now, and I'm pregnant, and this early spring, we were going to the wildlife park out here in the West Valley. And so we're rushing, we're trying to get there before the park opens to get there just on time, And we get to the park and I'm like, honey, where's his shoes? And my husband's like, I thought you got them. And it was just one of those things where we're just like, oh no. So yeah, we went into the gift shop to see if they had anything, and they just had flip-flops. And I really debated putting him in oversized flip-flops because he's 2, and I was like, should I do this? But I decided we ended up going back home and getting the shoes and everything. But yeah, it was definitely one of those moments. And I did have a moment like, what if one of my patients sees me with my 2-year-olds here and my son flip-flops? So it happens to everyone. So it was a humbling experience, but it was a lot of fun. We had a good time that day. But yeah, so I want to make sure this is interactive. I did make a PowerPoint, and so I will put that up. I'm not sure if I can see your faces once I put up the PowerPoint, so definitely, make some noise if you guys have some questions. So honestly, as a provider myself, I'm a pediatric provider. I work at Agave Pediatrics. I work at their West Valley Goodyear location, and then I spend a couple of days at their Deer Valley location. And so definitely it coming from my perspective. So I definitely want you guys to ask questions, and I really want to hear a lot more about troubles that you guys are having on a day-to-day basis. So I've taken from some of my patients some of the troubles I've seen, and then myself as a mom also, having the advantage of having a friend who saw my son. So that definitely helped me a lot. Over lunch, I could ask her a couple questions about my son, and I was always able to do that. But I know, a lot of moms in the community do not have that luxury. So I really want to make sure that by the end of this, you guys feel comfortable with understanding what your role is with your provider, and also what your provider's day is like, and kind of why it may take 3 days for a phone call for you to hear back from them and things like that. And, and at the end, I really want you guys to ask those questions, because I really want to dive in deep and get those complexities of talking to your provider answered. Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen real fast. Okay, I don't know if this is working. Okay. Let me see. Okay, it looks like I can see you guys. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, perfect, awesome. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of let you guys know that you're not alone. So we do, in a couple articles I saw online, a lot of times mothers and fathers feel really judged on their parenting skills. So how much more are you going to feel judged when you're in with your provider, who's supposed to be the expert and professional in these subjects, and you just feel like they're judging you the whole entire time, as they're just asking you these lists of questions and trying to figure out how your child is doing. So you're not alone in feeling that way. And then over 90% of parents do have concerns about their child development. So I was among these parents, even as a provider myself with my son. I had probably, in the first year of life, I had 2 to 3 things that I kind of was a little bit more stressed out about as far as his development goes. And I had to talk to somebody who was not his mom, who was able to just look at, it very objectively and tell me he was okay. So you're not alone in that. As a provider myself, and as many providers I've talked to, we want you to know that we do depend on you for information for your child. And we want you to ask us questions if you don't understand what's going on with your child. So, one of the biggest things about talking to your provider is picking your provider. You really want to make sure that you have picked a provider that you feel like has values that are important to you. So if you feel like you value alternative vaccine schedules, or you value waiting on antibiotics until you need that, we really want to make sure that you pick a provider that has those values as well. Okay. I find that it's really important to have an office provider that's close and convenient to you, because when your child's sick, it's hard to get out the door with a fever and everything, as we just talked about, and drive an hour away to an office that may have some of the things you want, but it's really a hassle to get there. I always encourage parents to do a meet and greet. So a lot of times we talk about meet and greets as that's that newborn period, that prenatal period where you're trying to just find a doctor for your little one. But I've done meet and greets, especially now since we're doing them over Zoom. I've done them for parents with patients that have already been born, and they have their list of questions in front of them, and they just are really trying to figure out what the values are of your office, and what your values are as a provider. And so I think that's really, really important, especially when you're moving from different areas, to make sure that you do call the office, try and get that meet and greet on the table, and just figure out if that's best for you. Also, that first visit. you do have to fill out a lot of paperwork in that visit. It's very time consuming, but use that first visit to the office. You don't have to commit. Use that first visit as a way to figure out, if you like that provider, ask those questions and use it to your advantage too. Also, it's important to figure out what your family priorities are. So, or what your priorities are in your provider. So is it their bedside manner, or is it their education or their time in practice? And so that can really help you when you're going through looking at your provider's bio and just figuring out what's best for you. So, a lot of people value the bedside manner. A lot of people value education. And so you really need to make sure that you are taking the time to figure out what is important to you. What's important to your neighbor, your best friend, may not be as important to you. So as a provider myself, I have needs of the parent and needs to make sure that I am appropriately giving your child care. So the most important thing is that I need you guys. I need mom, I need dad, I need the whole household to make sure I'm providing care. I can't give your child care without all of you guys helping me. Okay. So a lot of times when you come in for those visits and your provider is just asking you question after question after question, and you feel like, oh, shouldn't you have looked at my child by now? Like, what's going on? It's because we do need that picture, because we do have a limited time with your child. We also need to observe. So there will be time, your 1-year-old is in the office and walking over to the cabinets and just banging them open and shut and closing the drawers. And you're like, I'm so sorry. Like, I just can't keep control of them. Or, if they're just sitting in the chair watching a movie and they're one, and they're not moving, that kind of tells us a lot about the family, about your child's development. So that's a huge part of the visit. Even though you're probably so embarrassed, I can look at that scenario and say, okay, this and this and this and this. Okay, I know kind of what's going on in the family. I know that your child's very active, or I know that they're probably not feeling well because they're one and they're just sitting there watching a movie on an iPad, so I can kind of get a lot of information from that. But also we do need to ask you questions. We do need to make sure that we are getting a good picture of it, because sometimes I can tell a parent like, oh, it looks like they're not feeling well because they're just sitting there, and they're like, oh no, they're like this all the time. They're my quietest child at home. And so that can give you a lot of information as well. Oh, okay, let's see what happened. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not sure what's going on. I see. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, so this is probably going to open up a lot of discussion and questions. So if you guys have anything, please let me know. If you don't feel comfortable asking questions about this as we are recording, please make a note and ask me at the end. So a child's provider usually will see about 30 patients a day on average. So some offices will see 45 to 50, and some offices it's 25. Appointments are scheduled 10 to 15 minute blocks. Okay. And then sometimes they're double booked. So that kind of tells you a lot in why your provider may be a couple minutes late for your appointment. We hope it's minutes, but sometimes it may be a little bit longer, but that kind of tells you why. And honestly, it's not because we want to do this. I would love to see 15 patients a day. but it's because we have to because of the way insurance works. So we have to see this many patients a day. We have to schedule patients like that in order to meet the needs of our offices, of our providers, of our staff, and of the insurance companies. So that's one of the hard realities about being a provider. Because our day is so full, we often return phone calls either over the lunch hour or after hours. And then a lot of our charting is done at night at home. So on average, I'll spend about 2 hours at night doing charts. And then I'll usually call back my patients at my lunch hour and then after hours. And that's the same for, those lab results or those chest x-rays that we send out. I don't want you guys to be, I know as a mom myself, I don't want to be sitting at home worried for a whole day that my child has pneumonia and that they're not getting the antibiotic. So a lot of the times, I will try and return those phone calls first. And so then that kind of makes sense when you call about your child's reflux that has been happening for the past week, why that may be a phone call that's returned after 5. So rest assured, your provider is always working. They don't want you to feel like they didn't answer your question or that they're not returning your phone calls back, but that could be a reason why. And looking at an average day in a provider's life, why that could be. Okay. So I want to pause right here and see if anybody has questions about that. I can't see the question board, so if you guys can let me know. Okay, I do see Pamela. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay. All right. I have a question. I know when I gave birth to my child at Mercy Gilbert, and that's how we found our provider, where she came to do visits, in the hospital. Mm-hmm. And then after we were discharged, we were able to set up an appointment with her. I guess she had her private practice at that time. Do they still do that? Do they still kind of go to the hospitals?
So if you asked me this like a year ago, I would say yes. But because of COVID, they did ask the community providers to not enter the hospital to round on the newborns. So that is not happening right now. With the vaccine and everything coming out, that may come back, but we're really not sure. There's a lot of things in healthcare that we haven't quite figured out post-COVID yet. And so it's going to take a little bit of time. So that is something, I would ask, your child's provider periodically, or call an office, if you're looking into it, like, are you guys doing that yet? Is that something you guys are going to do? Just to see what the status of that is.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions right now?
That's a great question. I didn't realize they had done that, but it makes sense.
Yeah.
COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. COVID changed a lot of things. So.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, 30 to 50 patients. That's a lot of patients.
Yeah.
Wow.
It definitely is. So a lot of the older providers, you will find them more experienced, like, the ones that have been practicing for 20, 30 years. They're the ones that will see 45 to 50 patients a day. So some of the newer practices, so Agave, our max is about 32 to 35 a day. So we try and limit that number so it's not so high, but you will find, so that's kind of one of the things, if you've been with a man, usually it's the male doctors that see the 45 to 50 a day, so if you have seen an older doctor for a while, that probably makes sense why you feel like you're kind of shuffled through, sometimes because they do only have a limited amount of time. And that's just because of the insurance needs and changes, really. So yeah.
That is a lot of charting for that doctor. I feel for the doctor.
Yes, it definitely is.
It makes a lot more sense now why doctors' handwriting is laughable.
You can't even, you're like, first and last letter, just figure out what needs to happen.
Right. How do we get through this?
Yes, exactly.
Oh man.
Okay, so kind of what everyone is really wanting to know is like, how do I talk to my doctor? How do I, get the information across? So this is really coming from my perspective and some of the providers in my office that I have talked to, just about, how we feel like our parents can effectively communicate with us. So the most important thing is to come prepared with questions. But try to limit the number of questions, okay? One of the biggest things I tell my parents to do is, sometimes it's 2 months between visits, sometimes 3 in the early years. And so I tell them, open a note that is shared between you and baby's caretakers, in your phone. Open the note in your phone and just share it. Just write something down. If you see something on baby, just go ahead and type it in that little note, and then everyone who's involved in the child's care can add to that note, and then you guys can see what the concerns are. If the concern goes away, that's great. You can check mark it, that they've developed in that area and you're not as concerned. Assess your level of concern in those areas and do some research. So I'm not talking about typing in Google and just, my child's limping on the left leg for 3 months. Don't do that. Go to a website that has some good research behind it, some medical input as well. And at the end of this talk, I'll list some websites so you guys can take a screenshot of that. Some that I use, some that I print out for my patients so that they can look at some of the diagnoses I give. But yeah, do a little bit of research and see if that helps your concern, if that just raises it, okay? And then assess if you need a separate appointment for that, okay? So one of the things I get a lot from parents is reflux concerns. Okay, so if your child is spitting up after, eating, and, they're not really distressed by it, they're gaining weight well, but it's just kind of concerning you a little bit, you're wondering, do I need to switch something up? You can ask that in the well check, because your child's not showing really any signs of illness. But if you're noticing that your child's spitting up, they're having breathing issues with it, you're noticing a little bit of color change, and your level of concern, like grandma's mentioned it to you, grandpa's mentioned it to you, the neighbor down the street's mentioned it to you, that is a higher level of concern. So that is something that, in that 10-15 minute that we booked your appointment in, we probably need a whole nother set of 10 to 15 minutes for that appointment. So you probably want to call and make a separate appointment for that, because that is a really high level of concern for you as a mom. And so you want to make sure that you spend, or we as your doctor want to make sure that we spend enough time talking about that and giving it the level of discussion that it's needed. Okay, so just kind of go through your questions, and kind of decide what is most important, what is my level of concern, and do I need a separate appointment for that? And, if you don't know, that is always something that you can call the office about, talk to the person who makes appointments. Sometimes some offices have triage nurses, so they can help you decide, okay, yeah, you should make a separate appointment for that. Another thing that is really important to me that I find that some of my parents don't do is they don't ask if they don't understand my instructions. So towards the end of the day, I may just rattle off some things. Your child comes in for congestion, and I say, give them Zyrtec, have a cool mist humidifier in their room, put chest rub on their chest. All those instructions I gave you sparked extra questions for you. Well, how much Zyrtec do I give them? What kind of humidifier do I need? What kind of chest rub? Can I just use the Vicks that I use for myself? What can I do? So because I have said these instructions to probably 2 or 3 moms before you, I may not give you the level of directions and understanding that you need. So it's really important that if you don't understand, that you stop and you tell them, so can you write that down? Or how much of this do I need? And as a provider, I really appreciate when parents say that. It's really important to me when they tell me how much of this, I didn't quite understand that, because I know that when they leave, that they are treating their child the way I intended to instruct them, but maybe I just rattled off the directions a little bit too fast. Okay. So one of the biggest things, Vicks, adult Vicks can be very dangerous to a baby, so you do need to make sure that they have a certain type of children's chest rub. And so if that's something that if a parent didn't stop and understand that, and I was just talking, really fast, they may end up putting the wrong type of medication on their child. Okay. So definitely, I always encourage parents to do that. Another thing to do, especially when your child is sick or when you're really worried, is having somebody on the phone with you that can just listen in. Somebody who may not be as stressed out as you, or maybe wasn't up all night with the baby, so that can be dad, that can be grandma. Even if they live in another state, they can be that extra set of ears for you, and sometimes eyes, because we do FaceTime with parents all the time, especially with COVID. So really make sure that is something you do if your level of stress is a little higher, because when you're stressed out, you're not listening as well either, and so you may mistake some of the directions as well. And I then always ask for resources. Ask for them to print something off so you understand a little bit better what they diagnosed your child with. So biggest thing that I diagnosed is a child that comes in for a rash, and it's molluscum. I don't know if that's a term that you guys have heard, but it's a rash that's not, that big of a deal, but it looks really bad. And it's something that a lot of parents really want to go away right away. And it's not something that's going to go away right away. So that is something that I will usually print out a resource for parents so that they can look at it, they can refer to it multiple times. When grandma asks, why is that rash still there? They can say, this is the handout that my doctor gave me. I've read through it. Dad's read through it. It's okay. You're reassuring yourself when you wake up in the morning and you think about that rash again, you can go read that resource. So really important to ask for that as well. Okay. So really what's important is the doctor does not want you to walk away more confused than when you walked in with your child. Okay. So if you're feeling that way, you need to stop and talk to them. If you feel like even when you ask those questions that you're not getting the answers that you desire or need, go back to that first slide that I talked about in choosing your provider. And you may need to find somebody maybe within the same practice or maybe another practice that has those values that you value and those needs that you have. And that may be the right step for you, because communication is key. And we all know, we all have friends and we all have people on our life that there's just some things we cannot communicate to that person about because we're just so different personality. We're just on such a different wavelength. And so sometimes you may find that with the doctor that you're with, and you may need to switch just for that reason. It doesn't mean that the doctor is a bad doctor. It doesn't mean that you're a bad parent. It just means that you guys were not, your communication styles are different and you guys have different values. And that's something that you really needed to look at for your family. Okay. So safety is key. Okay. So just make sure that, that is important to you guys. Another thing is I really want to make sure that we work as a team. So parents, caretakers, and myself or your child's doctor, I need to work as a team with you guys. So when you come in and you have a concern, I do need to know dates. I need to know how long that concern's been present. So there are times, you know, mom's not able to bring baby, or mom's not able to bring her teenager, you know, and I'm like, well, how long has this issue been going on? And the person who brought them, they can't really tell you, or the teenager can't really tell you, or the preteen can't really tell you. So that is a part of the care. That's part of the teamwork that we all need. So, you know, usually I tell him, you know, let's call mom on the phone to get some extra information. Or sometimes I get parents that mom has written down very detailed notes. And so that is really important too, to work as a team. And then, you know, I'll give them notes in return, or, you know, make sure the person that you have bringing your child is taking very detailed notes as well, to make sure that they can relay them to you. Oftentimes, you know, I really need a description of symptoms and descriptions of concerns. So, you know, their knee is hurting. Okay. So this is probably for your older child, you know, your 5-year-old. So their knee's been hurting. How long has it been hurting? You know, try and give a little bit of a, you know, it's been hurting for 2 months. It's been hurting for a week. Did anything happen? Well, they fell off a slide a couple weeks ago. What does it feel like? And so that's the hardest thing for a 4 or 5-year-old to tell me, like, what does the knee pain feel like? And they're like, it's just knee pain. But that's something that you guys can kind of help with at home. You know, does it feel like a hammer is hitting the knee? Does it feel like somebody's pushing on your knee? You know, those are things that we need to know. And stomach pain is a big one too. You know, does it feel like somebody's punching your stomach? Does it feel like an elephant sitting on your stomach? So those are things that can really help in those visits, you know. And you as your child's provider, you guys know them the best. So you guys know if they can understand what it means when you say, does it feel like an elephant is sitting on your stomach? As opposed to, does it feel like, you know, you fell off the slide or something like that, you know? So a lot of times that really does help if you guys are in the visit with them, or you guys have kind of already asked these questions to them, just to help with the teamwork. Okay. So a lot of times I do see, you know, I feel like sometimes parents want us to just look at them and figure out exactly what's going on. And in some cases, that is something we can do. But in many cases, it's not. And so that's why we need the whole team of people around us to figure out what exactly is going on with your child. Okay. Now, does anybody have any questions about that before we move forward?
I was going to ask, actually, Damara, sorry. Thank you so much for all of this. This is really, really helpful. But my question was, has telehealth actually made some of these appointments where, you know, you're really concerned about one issue easier?
So, yes and no. So I feel like, you know, with some of the concerns, parents feel a little bit more comfortable having a telehealth visit. because they can do it from the comfort of their home. They don't have to come in. So we can kind of deal with a couple of those things. But when we started televisit, we did find that there were a couple complaints from parents that we cannot do over telehealth. So there's a couple things that have just, we found that we can only do in office. We can only give a proper assessment in office for that. So it's helped in some ways, and in some ways it has made things harder. So that's that yes and no answer.
That makes sense. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, for me personally, like if I have like a dumb little thing, I don't even know how to say that right.
Yeah,
I never would have thought about telehealth before, right? Well, no, even for me, like my own personal thing, like, right, I never would have thought about it before, and so I probably just would have like done nothing, right? But there have been situations where we were like, oh yeah, there's that telehealth line. Let's just call them and see what happens. And I would, and you get the same information that, oh, you should probably take allergy medicine or whatever it is, right? like things like that. But it did give me some peace of mind. So that's interesting. But I could see how, from the physician standpoint, and being an IBCLC, right, there's some things we can't look at. Yeah, right. You're like, well, I think, could you just maybe just show me, with your hand? Yeah.
It's been quite an interesting journey with telehealth this past year.
Yeah.
And I love how, okay, so like I'm an IBCLC too, and like I've been able to do a lot over telehealth, and it's been actually kind of surprising how much we can get done, even when it's not ideal for telehealth, right? Like it would obviously be much easier in person, but I have said, let's do an in-person appointment, and we can, have your hubby call in on Zoom or on FaceTime. Not in my wildest would I have thought, which doesn't make any sense logically, would I have thought to call in my husband into a ped appointment with my child. I'm like, why didn't I think of that? Like, it's brilliant. Because two heads are definitely better than one when you've, again, had to wrangle your kid out the door. And especially if they're not feeling well and you're doing a lot of, care on your own just for that child in that moment. And then to make sure that you're asking all the questions and keeping the dates straight and the symptoms straight. And when this happened and the other thing happened. And like, my brain just turns to mush, like, fix him, like, I don't know what's wrong with him. And so to be able to have another brain, in on that, oh gosh, that's going to change the way I do pediatrician visits from now on. So thank you. I love that.
That is something with, COVID that we have really valued. Just go ahead and having, the other caretaker on the phone. Because really, I feel like we're not seeing as many repeat visits, and I feel like we are able to get that information across a little bit, in a little bit better way. And so that is something I'm going to really continue doing, even when we let, 5 people in the office again. I'm really going to really say, okay, is there any other caretaker? Let's get them on the phone. Because, a lot of the times before COVID, I would get those phone calls, from the other parent, dad, especially if it's a 2 household situation, dad is calling and, I didn't quite understand what happened in that visit, and you're doing a whole nother visit with the other person. And so, so it's really important. So I definitely would say value that for sure. Okay, so I kind of talked about this a lot, just working as a team with your provider. And so one of the other things I wanted to talk about is just the routine well child checks. That is really important when you're trying to talk to your provider. So we really want to make sure that we've gotten like a really good look at your child when they're well. So then when you come in for those sick visits, or when they when you need that, sports physical paper signed real fast or something like that, we're not trying to get you to come into the office, or we're not trying to do a whole nother thing. Some of those, like we talked about with televisits, some of those things can be done due a televisit if we have seen them, and we have a good way and we know that everything's going well, and we do need to get that picture at how child's doing at home. So sometimes we can't do that as well just from a phone call or just from that sick visit. We can only really do it as well at those regular well check visits. So, I get a lot of that, if they're not getting shots, why do we need to do that? Because there's a lot of other things we need to look for in that visit. So that's a way that we can work as a team with you as well. And then the last one that we kind of talked about already is just to be honest with your provider. So it's okay not to know. Okay, so if I ask you, how long has the knee pain been there? And you tell me you don't know, I'm not gonna judge you. I have a son of my own. And I know that he may not tell me, when he got that scratch, or, when I'm heading out the door, trying to get to work and trying to get him to daycare, and there's that rash and the daycare worker tells you about it, So really don't feel like you're judged. Every provider kind of knows what it's like. So, and you're probably not the first mom they've encountered that doesn't know. So just tell them, I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know. And then doing those well checks. If your child doesn't take their 5 servings of fruits and vegetables, it's okay. Like, just let your provider know.
I'm cracking up about that, Damara. Because here's what happens in my appointments. Oh, mom, or are we eating well-rounded diet? I'm like, yes. Turn to child. Do you eat fruits and veggies? Yes, I eat, XYZ every day. And it's like, all the junk that they don't really eat all that often, but it's on the forefront of their mind because they're like, what's the delicious stuff? And I'm like, oh my gosh, in the corner, like, shh, don't say that. Be quiet.
No, I totally get that, because I love asking my 4-year-old patients what their favorite food is. And, it's always pizza. What do you like to drink? It's always juice, and stuff like that. And you kind of see mom just kind of like crumble, in the corner. And you're like, it's okay. It's fine. I know that that's not everything they eat, but you do, that is a good way to figure out if the child is meeting their milestones as well. And so, sometimes we're asking just for that reason. And then sometimes parents are like, no, but they don't do that. And it's like, I know, I can see their weight. I can see they're doing okay. So yeah, so don't ever feel bad about, being honest with your provider and letting them know that something isn't on point. We can't all be perfect. And I really don't think anybody can get 5 servings of fruits and vegetables in their child a day. We try, but I really don't think so. So just kind of talking about what we've already talked about, just kind of revisiting that, just give detailed answers and questions when you can. Use your phone for taking notes, share notes between all the caretakers. One of the biggest things that I appreciate in my well checks is when I walk into the room and mom or dad says, we have a list of questions for you, and I like that better than after I've gone through everything. And then at the end of the visit, I tell them, I'm like, do you guys have anything else? Because I've used my 10, 15 minutes. And I'm like, do you guys have, and they're like, oh, I have a list. And you're like, oh, which is fine. You really want them to come, I never want that to feel like you came out and you didn't get your questions answered. But tell your provider at the beginning, I have a list of questions. Have a support person call in. We talked about that a lot. Focus on one subject for sick visits. Okay. So one of the things that is really difficult is if I have a child that comes in because they have a sore throat, and these are usually like my older children, so I know we have some with preteens and teens on here. So these are usually my older children, you know, they come in with a sore throat, they need to do a strep test and a COVID test so they can go back to school. But they've been also having leg pain for the past 2 months, and they have acne, and then they have this rash that we just don't really know about. And so we're using that sick visit to kind of deal with all those issues. And I understand why, because they're busy, you know, they're teenagers, they're in school full time, and they probably have all these sports and all these other activities. So it's kind of like, okay, we're here, let's get this done. But a lot of times we can't spend as much time on all of those subjects that are really important. We can't spend enough time on that. So I may be like, okay, we need to do this for another visit, or I may go through it as quickly as possible just because I know you're so busy. But we may be missing something. We may not get it enough time for that. So really try and focus on one subject for those visits, or at least the same system, you know. So sinus, abdomen, you know, lungs, try and focus on the same system when you can. And then always ask for a handout. A lot of offices will be able to print a visit summary for you as well. So you can see the diagnosis is on there. You can go look that up. And then here is the resources that I would usually tell you guys to use if you guys are going to look up diagnoses or see what's wrong. And so I use kidshealth.org the most. I love that website. It's just really detailed, and it breaks it up for teenagers too, for parents, and for like little older children, so they can kind of read through it and figure out what's going on as well. So that is huge as well. But yeah, so those are those resources that I would recommend you guys use when looking things up. Okay.
Can I interject with a question that was in the chat? Because it pertains to what you were just talking about prior to this list, which, thank you. This is amazing. I love having this list so I can make sure, you know, because Dr. Google is not a good doctor, unfortunately. So it's nice to have more specific, trusted resources versus just, you know, the mass brain of Wikipedia. The question in the chat was, if you have no major concerns, what are the most important questions to ask at a well visit?
Okay, so I would probably ask about like the weight and the height of the child, and just ask if it's appropriate, because we have so many different sources of feeding, you know, child, you know, and you always want to kind of just check and make sure that we are in a good spot with that. So I would probably always ask that. A lot of times doing those well checks, if you don't have any questions, I will go through pretty much each system. So I'll ask about eating, how they're eating, peeing and pooping. I'll ask about sleep, and then I'll go through their developmental milestones and just make sure they're doing well. So, you know, is your child walking well? You know, are they climbing? And for school-age children, do they enjoy school? Are they having issues with subjects? So that's kind of, I'll usually ask a lot of those questions. So don't ever feel pressured to ask questions in those visits. Don't feel like you have to. A lot of times we'll go through everything, and it's like, okay, yeah, you're right, they're fine, you know, and that's perfectly fine. And that really does help. Okay. So yeah, don't ever feel like you have to do that. Alrighty, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone again. Yay, okay. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions?
You know what? I'm going to pop us off of recording. So thank you, Damara. If you're watching this recording, if you want to send us some other questions later, that's fine. But we're going to pop off now so people can ask questions more privately. Okay. Oops.